Joel Greenberg, how you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you. I am very good.
This is our second recorded conversation.
Yep.
So what I'm dying to know off the top is, what was the reaction to our first conversation?
Well, the first conversation was the last episode in Series 1. It was episode 11. And I've spoken to, quite a number of people have listened to it and have been very generous in their commentary. I guess starting with my wife, with Phyllis,
Right.
said when we were talking to a friend who brought it up, and she said, there were a number of things you raised that you never told me. I said, well, it wasn't a secret. But I said in conversation with Mike asking questions, and with me not, picking and choosing carefully.
Right.
It's fun to be able to talk without feeling that that I have to be cautious or careful. If you're doing a sort of a more standard interview, interviews that I've done, almost always promoting a project of some kind, you're far more guarded and careful to not be, to digress. But in conversation with you, like as I'm talking to you right now,
Right.
you just let it go.
Well, it's interesting. So you had your series 1, and I know we talk British here,
Yeah.
okay? Because
Yeah.
I want to say like season 1,
Yeah.
but absolutely you had series 1.
Yep.
And 11 episodes dropped for series 1. And like you said, that 11th episode where you sat on the other side, if you will, and I interviewed you.
Yeah.
But you're right, it does give you an idea of what it's like for your guests when you have these longer form conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. I was so struck when I was listening to the episodes as they dropped. I was so grateful that people were so, they were so easy with talking about themselves, about doubts, about insecurities, about anxieties, and aware of, in several cases, aware that they have a substantial public profile, which doesn't somehow, it's not like a protective shield. You still have, actors who have been doing this, mostly actors who have been doing this work for 30, 40, and even 50 years. And, in those more senior years, wanting to keep working and realizing that there's less and less opportunity. Or if they've had careers in large festivals or in large productions, that there's still some of that. But, as a couple of people did said, I just want to, I'm so grateful to be able to work anywhere.
Right.
And hearing that, that was really also when I first listened to the Two Shot Pod, the British podcast that, inspired me to want to do something similar. It was hearing people talk that easily, that honestly, that I found so immediately engaging.
Do you think it has a lot to do with how much time you give it? That, a typical interview to promote something or other might go, 3 to 7 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Where when you converse with a guest, you block off like an hour. Sometimes it goes over an hour, sometimes it's less than an hour, but basically there's room to breathe and explore.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also very clear. I've tried to make it clear before each conversation. There isn't a prep time. So mostly what happens is, as guests, as people accept my invitation, I'll say, now that we have a series 1, I'll say, you should listen to, if you haven't already, you should listen to an episode or 2. It will give you a very clear idea of what this podcast is. But even with that, I say, it's conversation. I don't have a script. I tend to begin in the same place. I'm fascinated to know where people, how people have come to the life they have. Was that part of their upbringing or not? So that's where I begin each episode, each conversation. But then after that, as I say to the guests, I said, I do my best to follow them rather than to sort of set the topics and the themes. And as a result, I think because each guest is a distinctive personality, I think I hope that the episodes really do sound unique, and you can't confuse one guest with another.
So just to peel back the curtain a little bit. So you dropped 11 episodes in series 1.
Yeah.
And as we talk right now on a Friday in January, you're still recording episodes for series 2. Like we literally just had I just heard a conversation between you and Ted Dykstra that ended minutes ago.
Yep.
And so I've had this interesting vantage point on your evolution as a host, because I feel like possibly, and you'll correct me if I'm out to lunch here, but like in the beginning you did have notes. Mm-hmm. I feel like papers would come with you and notes, and then as you you did this, the notes got smaller and smaller, and now there's no notes on the table.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, certainly for the first few, and I think the notes. I think the notes were as much like a security blanket.
Well, like feather was for Dumbo.
Yeah. I had to have something in front of me, even if I didn't refer to it.
Right.
No, but you're
like a safety net, maybe.
Yeah. No, it is absolutely. And because I've never done, I haven't done this before.
Right.
I've certainly been on the other side, being interviewed, and I know. I think all people who are interviewees have pretty good instincts for when the person who is interviewing actually has no idea who they're talking to,
right,
or why. So I didn't want to be that, and this is fun. I mean, it really is fun because talking to people. I mean, the people who are participating in this and joining me in conversation are so interesting, and they're so willing to talk. So I don't have to, my work isn't to get them to loosen up.
Right. Well, it's interesting how different all the guests are, and like you really don't know what you're gonna get till you rock. We literally recorded twice with the same guest, and they were very different episodes. Like so you really don't know what you're gonna get, and there's so many variables at play. Yeah. And again, it's fresh in my mind because you just recorded it. But the Ted Dykstra conversation, just how giving he was, like some harsh realities, I would say, like the stuff that doesn't make the bio that he prints in the the book or whatever. Yeah. But you really, like, he felt comfortable enough to he talked about his alcoholism, and he just talked about everything.
Yeah. I mean, all people won't. He was. I remember in the episode with Michael Healy, when Michael said that for the first 10 years of his career he wasn't writing, or if he wasn't writing plays. He was acting. He said he was not getting really very good work at all. And I remember I found it particularly potent when poignant as well, when he said, I used to go to the theater and I would sit and I would get, I think he said, I would get angry, thinking I should be up there. I can do better. Right. Or that kind of envy. And I said, wow, that's probably, that's amazing. I mean, it's wonderful to hear that somebody can be that forthcoming. And not in a way, like he wasn't applauding himself for saying it. I mean, that was a reality. And I've no doubt that people who have listened to him, particularly people who have been in a position to feel that they are yearning for something they're not getting, whether it's in the theater or otherwise, you can connect with these people.
So you revealed moments ago that you listened to series 1 as a subscriber. So they would drop, and you would literally listen as a subscriber as they dropped, even though we had recorded them all in advance. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, like, how did you feel, like, as you would listen to yourself? Like, are you particular, like, some people are very critical of themselves, like, oh, I don't like that and I don't like this. Like, I'm just wondering, when you're listening back to these episodes after they drop, and you're listening with the masses who are also listening, Phyllis is listening, everybody's listening, Jessica's listening. Yep. How did you feel?
Well, I remember clearly the first conversation was with Mark McGrinder. Mark is my son-in-law. We didn't, afterwards somebody asked me, said, "Did you talk about that?" I said, "Well, no." I said,
No, you didn't, because I think I didn't connect these dots till right now.
And also, I didn't, it wasn't a plan. We weren't being coy. It just didn't come up. And I've known Mark. I mean, I knew him long before he was part of the family. He was a student of mine at the University of Waterloo. So I knew him. I think I met him when he was 18 or 19, something like that. So I've known him for a very long time. And that conversation was really easy because Mark did all the talking. I occasionally was able to get something in. But after that, with people who I didn't know well, or people I hadn't had any contact with in 30 or more years, I was anxious about being relaxed and being able to follow them. And there were one or two where I thought, oh, there are so many us. And repeated phrases. But I don't mind the sound of my own voice. I don't care. There certainly are, I have mentioned to a couple of our guests, you can now listen to this if you want. And several of them said, I never listen to myself. I understand that.
Right.
And I think when I was acting a very long time ago, I found it I found it difficult to listen. I found it much harder to watch myself. I don't know how I'm sure there are people who know how to do that. I certainly didn't. No, it was fun. And I've listened to all the episodes and I've enjoyed it because it's fun. I'm not going into rehearsal and worrying about whether what I'm going to bring into the room is going to be celebrated or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, if it wasn't fun, you wouldn't be doing this.
No.
No,
that's true.
Because then it's a job.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Jobs come with a paycheck.
Yeah, and we know there's none of that. But no, but we also, when you and I first met, I said I want to record all of these 11 episodes before any of them become available to the public.
Right.
And short of the advice you gave me, saying just be aware that if any of the guests talk about something that is very time specific, and that particular episode runs after whatever the event is, that could be problematic. But that didn't come up. I wanted to do that. It's similarly to what we're doing now, recording everything for Series 2 in January, because I didn't want it to turn into a job, in that I didn't want to do an episode with Ted today and then immediately think, oh, in 4 days, I'm going to have to be back here doing this, and then the week after that, and the week after that.
It becomes part of the grind.
Yeah, yeah. So when things, people, the friends of mine who know that I'm doing this have said, you must be so busy. This was, while I was running, I said, no, actually, the work's, it's all done. I mean, and I imagine, though I haven't done TV, series, or film, or anything like that, since film in particular, I think, is usually the actor's job, particularly, is probably finished long before the world sees it. We don't know that. The real time aspect is gone. So I look forward. I mean, I really do look forward to getting these episodes done. Doing it all within a month is easy. I get to come into your studio several times. And when that stopped, after Series 1 was all recorded and then it was running, I really felt like I was abandoning you.
Well, I got used to this rhythm.
Yeah.
And I would spend, several hours a week with my buddy Joel Greenberg, and then all of a sudden you were gone.
I know.
And then there was that, that little bit of like a time delay. You talked about actors, like they film these series, and then 6 months later, when they're dropped in the public, it's like everybody's aware of them, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm watching you on TV," and oh, you must be busy. But meanwhile, you haven't worked in 6 months.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But it's like, where's Joel? Okay, so I'm very excited. There's a Series 2.
Yeah.
But interesting that so Mark McGrinder was your first guest in the studio.
Yeah.
And obviously you had a rapport and you knew each other and you talked about it, but it's only today, I was this years old when I realized he's your son-in-law.
Yeah.
So that sure never came up in the conversation.
Yep.
But on that note, so For series 2,
Yeah.
see, I'm British now too. I've decided I like this series thing. For series 2, one of your guests who was also in person, and this has already been recorded, so I've already witnessed it.
Yep.
Jessica Greenberg.
Yep.
Is that easier because this is your daughter, or is it more difficult because this is your daughter?
It's a similar question that I've been asked when I've been directing a play that Jessica is acting in. And my answer to you about the podcast is similar to how I've answered in the past, and that I take my lead from her. I mean, Jessica was so comfortable. And what I wanted to be able to, I was hoping to have a conversation with her that was informative, and where I was able to do with her, I guess, what I do with other guests, and reveal things, have her reveal things, not, deep trauma stuff. Because at one point, you'll remember, she said when she was in theater school, she remembered blaming us, her parents, for the fact that she didn't have this traumatized life. And in theater school, she said she saw all around her, she said, people who were drawing on these horrible
Shame on you, Joel.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I did, I probably because we've been working together for a long time, though we're not now. I mean, I've been away from Studio 180 for a couple of years. I don't know. I didn't think it was, I think I was probably anxious at the beginning to not be asking stupid questions or making assumptions. I mean, she reminded me of things that I didn't remember, and that probably added to my comfort level.
Yeah, I would think you might be hyper aware at the beginning to treat her like any other guest.
Yeah.
And not make it like father-daughtery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's also, at the same time, I'll go, because you were very successful not making Mark McGrinder father's son-in-law because it didn't come up at all. But so that's one of the great conversations awaits us in series 2. So when I asked you earlier about how you felt listening back to yourself in series 1 as a podcast subscriber, now I'm curious, what feedback did you get from others who listened along with series 1?
People, the feedback, I would like more. I mean, I've been getting feedback, and mostly with, I've learned with the podcast, I never did it. I mean, I knew what Instagram, I knew what the word was,
right,
but I didn't subscribe to it. I didn't look at it. And now in an effort to broadcast the podcast, I use Instagram. I post a lot of photos on Instagram, largely production photos that guests, showing guests in different films and plays. And similarly, some of the stuff on Facebook, because they're both, Facebook and Instagram are the same meta. So it's really easy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You asked.
Well, I'm just curious. So I'm just wondering, did anybody give you any harsh criticism?
No.
Are people too, because most of these listeners are Canadian, they're not going to give you harsh criticism.
No, I mean, it's, at the beginning in particular, when it was new, good for you. And I think it's great. That was sort of that kind of almost generic. And I don't say that critically. I don't know. I've asked where, as much as possible, I've sent out a couple of, I guess you'd call them newsletters to my own cobbled together list, asking people to comment. I'm particularly aware that on Apple Podcasts, you can rate and write reviews. And I know that, with the thousands and thousands of podcasts that are out there, that people are listening to podcasts. They're not, their job is really not, I don't think their top priority is to go to the website and to start writing things. But a couple of people have commented, and it's all been positive. I don't know what it means. At the end of series 1, I've got, I guess, something like 480 followers. I don't even know, honestly. I know what the number is. I do not check the analytics on a daily or even weekly basis, but I know because I get these reports and I don't ask, they arrive.
Right.
So I know the number of followers.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now, you made a good point a minute ago because I was thinking to myself, I listen, I produce podcasts, but
Yeah.
I listen to podcasts every day.
Yeah.
I like to go on a bike ride, listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
I've never gone to my computer to leave a comment. Like
Right.
I've actually, it's a one-way street to me. It's
Yeah.
like, I'll take, but you're not getting anything.
Yeah.
My goodness. So the fact that somebody takes the time to
Yeah.
leave a comment, it's amazing.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right about podcasts. I mean, when I listen to podcasts mostly when I'm walking, because I walk, that's something I like to do.
Sure.
When I'm driving, and I don't drive all that much when I come here. It's
Right.
probably about 20 minutes, half an hour to get here. So that's a good length of time. I can listen to a podcast. I can listen to music. But that, and then I'll listen to podcasts. Often I'll listen to podcasts at night when I'm tired and I'm falling asleep in front of the TV. I'd sooner listen to people talk than
Right.
have these images in front of my face. But it is podcasts in the same way, as you know, I often ask people to consider contributing to help support the podcast because
Right.
it's self-funded. And early in my investigation about how you do this sort of thing, a couple of people who I spoke to who were familiar with podcasts said, what you're doing, we call a passion project because you're not, I said, look, I'm not trying to monetize this. I'm not looking for advertisers. I won't find them. And I wouldn't even know how to do that. And I'm not looking for, I don't want a job that, where I feel that what I'm doing now is work because it'll wear me out.
Right.
So, why am I?
So
telling this?
so
Yeah.
what maybe this is a good chance before I get back to some very specific questions I
Yeah.
have for you. It's a good chance to remind the listenership
Oh, right.
if they want to help financially, and basically that's mainly me, right? So it's
Yeah.
I'm your expense on all
Yeah.
this. So go ahead and remind people how they can financially support you, and then I've got some specific questions for you.
Why? Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So there are two ways. If you're in Canada, certainly in Toronto, but in Canada, e-transfer is the simplest, and you can do that by sending contributions to Jerica, Jerica, Life in Stages at Rogers.com. And for the listeners who are outside of the country, you would go to Patreon, patreon.com/lifeinstages. And at Patreon, the instructions are very clear about how to contribute. Thanks.
Again, Joel's not going to show up here in his brand new Mercedes or whatever because of all he's just trying to pay my invoice. So help him with this passion project, because I was very excited to hear there was a series 2, because not only do I get to see more of you, but I enjoy listening to you talking to the guest, because it's almost like you're hearing the podcast in real time.
Yeah.
And I'm a curious cat too. Like the Ted Dykstra we just recorded, I'm listening to this and I'm like, I had no idea. And he starts to open up and I'm like, oh, he feels comfortable. Like he's just going to tell it like it is. And it might not be, sunshine and rainbows,
Yeah.
but this is real.
Yeah.
So you are doing what I think is the most important job of a host, which is you're making your guest feel relaxed enough to share with you the way Ted was sharing with you.
Great.
So that's
Thank
great.
you. Yeah.
Now, this is a very pointed question, but
Yeah.
if you could record series 1 over again, like fresh start, that
Yeah.
was like a practice round,
Mhm.
would you do anything differently? Like, is there anything you've been thinking, oh, I wish I had done this differently in this particular conversation? Any of that?
No.
No regrets.
There was one episode, and maybe it was you'll probably know this better than I. It may have been the first. I think it was the first episode of series 2 where I didn't introduce myself, and at the end of the episode, I didn't end the episode. I mean, I just said thank you to Morris Panich, and then after the fact said, "Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I think I wasn't ready for this one." So
Right.
that's something. But no, it's exactly the format that I imagined, for the conversations to be pretty free form, and I wouldn't. I really, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't even know what I'd want it to change, how I'd want it to change.
Oh, that's ideal right
Yeah.
there. So you just mentioned Morris Panich,
Yeah.
and I mentioned Jessica Greenberg. So do you want to tease any of the other names that we'll be hearing in series? And again, I'm
Sure.
actually not sure now as I talk to you. I guess does this drop as like the 11th episode? So people have heard these already?
Yeah, I think this will be episode 12, like the first of
Okay.
series 2.
Okay. Oh, I see. The first of series 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Then tease what's coming up in
Okay.
this second
Okay, so
series.
we will be meeting Corinne Koslow and Nancy Polk and Shauna McKenna and Sherry Flett and Jonathan Wilson and R.H. Thompson and Tom McCamus. And we've already recorded Morris Panich and Jessica Greenberg and Ted Dykstra. If I've left anybody out, it's because I don't have sheets of paper in front of me.
Which I like, actually.
Yeah. And if I've left anybody out, it's my error. It's not in
It's on
any way. And the broadcast order is yet to be determined.
To be determined.
Yeah.
Okay. Has anyone said no? And it's up to you if you want to name a name, but has anyone said no to your invitation?
Well, a couple of people. In series 1, a friend who was a longtime actor just said this. He began by saying, "I don't think I'm that interesting." Him, not me. And
Right.
I disagreed. I said, I wouldn't have asked you this if I felt you weren't that interesting. And his follow-up response was, "I don't think this is a really good time for me." So that,
You got the hint.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And this time with this series, there were 2 people who, when I approached them, one said he was currently dealing with some very serious family issues. He said, my mind is probably not in the right place. Mm-hmm. And the other person, said, sure, this would be good. And I never heard from him again. So it's been small in number. And in fact, a few people who have commented, largely, I guess, on Facebook, looking at photos and some of the brief text that I posted, a few people have said, I would be thrilled if you would consider, including me in a future episode or 2.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That, Phil, you got the hint on this one. Go ahead.
And Rebecca Northern is also one of the names. It takes a while, but yes, Rebecca Northern, that may be the last name for series 2.
Okay, exciting. But that initial response you got, which is, I'm not that interesting. That's my personal pet peeve when it comes to scheduling my guests.
Right.
And as you can imagine, at over 1,600 shows, a lot of people have, said no or said nothing at all. There's been a lot of that, or said yes, but then disappeared, like one of your guests. Mm-hmm. But that whole "I'm not that interesting" it irks me because it's my job to extract the interesting. Okay, you're encroaching. I'm just asking you to have a conversation with me.
Yeah. I mean, with that first, in the first series, the friend that I mentioned who, followed up by saying, "I don't think this is a good time," that was really what was clearly at the heart of it, because I said anybody who's been acting for as long as you have, with the range of what you've played, of course you're interesting, but
right.
Yeah.
What I've noticed happens, it's been happening in series 2, maybe as I get more comfortable, but you'll record like an hour with the guest, and then we'll stop recording, and then I'll get in my question, and today with Ted Dykstra, it was about the fact he voiced the father of who's the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Daniel Tiger. Okay, Mike, don't forget this. The father of Daniel Tiger is voiced by Ted Dykstra, so I get to come in with that because I remember my boy being obsessed with Daniel Tiger when he was like 3-4 years old. So there's this. We don't record it, but this is almost like the after hours post. Mike gets in his questions. So
yeah.
Maybe we should record those as like a bonus or something like that. Who knows? Okay, so we've talked about series 2, which is coming soon. Mm-hmm. One guest I know you would love to have, and I think we'd love to hear you have this conversation. And it sounds like it's not happening for series 2, but now this makes me wonder if there could be a series 3.
Right.
Because the gentleman, the name Craig Parkinson.
Right.
So Craig Parkinson, for those who don't remember our first conversation, he hosted the show that inspired this show. Any luck getting the inspiration for your podcast as a guest, Craig Parkinson?
Well, just when I knew we were going to be doing a series 2, it was probably sometime in December, I wrote to Craig Parkinson's agent and said, please pass this on to Craig. Let him know that what he did with the 2-Shot Pod, which ran, I think, for about 4 years. It was 200 plus episodes. It stopped. The last episode ran exactly a year ago, and that's when I first listened to it, or first became aware of it. I said, can you please, tell him that Life in Stages is thanks to what he did. And if there is any way that we could arrange a time, I would love to have a conversation with him. I feel that I owe it to him. He doesn't owe me anything, but I owe him the thanks. And she wrote back and said, no, he's very pleased to hear this, and yes, he'd be willing to do it. We'll get back to you.
Okay, time to follow up.
And I've sent a follow up, and we'll see. There's a time difference, right, between us and the UK.
Yeah, so it's like 5 hours.
Yeah.
You could record right now, and it'd be a nice, comfortable.
Yeah, I'm hoping. No, I'm hoping that it might work. I'm going to be in London in March, so not that he's necessarily in London, but at the very least, I might be able to meet him. It would be so nice because I've spent so much time with him without him knowing it.
We'll get a photo for your Instagram.
Sure.
Now that you figured out that beast.
That's right.
You're an Instagrammer now.
Oh, I should. Yeah, that's a really good idea. It would be easy enough to find his picture. Yeah, thank you.
There you go. But the picture that'll break the internet is the picture of you and Craig meeting in London, if he is even in London.
Sure.
Okay, we'll find out.
Yeah.
So I asked you if you would change anything about Series 1, and
right.
you gave this refreshingly beautiful answer, which is no. It was perfect as it was. So it was perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, though, have you modified your interview style? Like when you have these one-on-one conversations, have you learned anything about hosting them that will make Series 2 even better than Series 1?
Maybe the here's a you're the real commitment to this answer. I do believe that I'm able to ask more direct questions, probing a little bit, because I'm not an investigative journalist or podcast guy, and I'm certainly not trying to get people to reveal things they wouldn't otherwise reveal to people.
Right.
But I think that my questioning, I want to believe that my questioning is getting better, sharper than it was at the beginning, when I think I tended to circle things. I sort of moved in from the outside, and now I don't feel I have to do that.
No, great point. I've noticed that you're getting better at this, for what it's worth here.
Yeah.
And I think that's just putting in the reps.
Mm-hmm.
Like having done it now like over a dozen times. Yeah. It's like now you can almost anticipate, how to get there. Like sort of like a chess, I suppose, where the move you want to make like 3 moves from now. Yeah, so it's sort of like you need to get you got to think ahead, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's fair.
Instead of which you're doing a better job of. Okay. So we have Series 2 dropping now. I'm curious, have you thought about Series 3 yet?
I'm starting to. I'm aware. Certainly, looking at the the guest list, there are always. I said, how could what about? Because no matter what no matter how many episodes there might be, I'm so aware of how many people who I haven't had the opportunity to talk to.
Right.
And it certainly there's a huge range of what's possible. What I did, one of my less successful forays into extending my reach well beyond my own network, I sent information to every professionally listed theater in the country, just saying, this is the podcast, this is coming, this is what it's about, and please let your community know about it. And if you have people who you would like to recommend, please help me. And to date, there hasn't been a single response. So
Well, that's disappointing.
yeah. So I keep drawing from my own, and a few of the guests have said we know so many people. Said if there's anybody that you don't know or you would like us to introduce you to, please let us know. So that's wonderful, and I have been able to meet a few people that way, and through some agents, a couple of theater agents who I know, who I've worked with over many years, have also been very, very helpful in connecting me with people. I mean, it's so nice that somebody who either I have never met or who we met in passing a long time ago is so easy and saying, yeah, sure, that would be great.
And as you do this, and as you have more conversations, these one-on-ones, I do think you alluded to this, but you'll hear a guest talking about somebody else, and you'll realize, I would like to talk to them, and then your greatest referral for that is the guest you just talked to, who'll be like,
that's right,
introduce you basically. Here's Joel, he's got a great podcast. You two should have a conversation or whatever. And it's fun as I ask you about, here we are still recording series 2, and I guess this is the first episode of series 2.
Mm-hmm.
Hello out there, podcast listeners. But I'm asking you about, will there be a series 3? I realize that's a lot like when somebody spends 3 years writing a book and then the book launches and what's your next book about? And they're like, I just birthed this book and I can't,
I mean, this is not, I understand that. I mean, in fact, interestingly enough, I was at a book launch last night for a very, very dear friend whose book, I think this is her 3rd book. And there was the inevitable Q&A.
Right.
And of course,
what's your next book going to be about?
Exactly. And you're this like, poor woman.
I'm literally right now launching this new book.
Exactly. I've spent, this book I think came together rather quickly as a book. But you're absolutely right. The same thing happens with filmmakers. I was just listening. There was a really, really good interview with Mike Lee. And Mike Lee is one of my favorite filmmakers. And I think the film Hard Truths, which is just about to start in Toronto, I think it's been 7 years since his last film, and he's now in his 80s. And the interviewer, I mean, it was a good interviewer, but he said, so what's next? And Mike Lee said, I am in my 80s. And he said, I always have ideas. He said, we'll see.
That's the only answer to that question. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what the future holds.
Yeah.
I know how I want to close, but on our way there, I'm playing chess. I know what my final move is going to be. I got to get there. But what I think, to be honest, I think your secret sauce in doing this and why you're so good at this is you are a curious cat. That's everything, right? Like, you're legitimately, there's no phony baloney going on here. You're not acting. You're not some hired gun to do this hosting duties. You're a curious cat, and you're picking at the threads and asking the right questions because you legitimately would like to learn and know about this person's inspiration and everything. So your curiosity, I think, fuels Life in Stages.
Okay.
There you go. Just take that note down.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
And then speaking of asking the right questions, we open this conversation when I ask you, did anyone close to you learn stuff about you from our first conversation, where I kind of got this great biography? Like, I got to learn all about your, Montreal, what was going on there, why you ended up here. And it was really interesting. I put it in my podcast feed as well. So a lot of ears got on that conversation. And then to hear that your wife, Phyllis, learned things that she didn't know about you from that conversation. And again, being so close to the subject matter, you almost like you can't see the forest for the trees. Yeah. You're just not asking the right questions. So you're not withholding it, but somebody's got to ask the right questions. Yeah. And really that's what you're doing. And if your wife ever had, 60 to 90 minutes to record a conversation with you, she would absolutely learn more about you because she would be asking the right questions.
Yeah. And that is that's Phyllis's credo. She is really good at asking very often people say, how do you know this? She said, because I ask the right questions. Right. But there is something also certainly about being so close to somebody. Yeah. I mean, you just don't take the time to do that.
Can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
I think. So keep asking the right questions. We're not done recording all the episodes for series 2, but I look forward to like when they do release them. I also listen as, even though I'm in the room for them and then I edit them and everything. Although minimal editing, I'll let the listenership know this is really like live to tape conversations. But it's the very minimal editing in terms of the meat of the podcast. But I also listen as a subscriber, so I'll go on a bike ride and I'll listen back, and then and I enjoy it. Kind of, this is how everyone else is like consuming it, and I kind of enjoy doing that. So I look forward to listening to series 2.
Great.
I'll keep my fingers crossed for series 3. And I'm glad you're back in my life. I enjoy working with you on this passion project.
Thank you. You make it so easy for me, Mike. It's a real pleasure.